Hey, what's up everyone? Morey Croson here, and today we're going to be talking about how your ground contact has a big impact on your ability to turn over legs, and we'll start the video right now. This is the newest edition of the Performance Lab. Reach your individual goals. We don't want to just talk about straight line speed. We also want to talk about your ability to be quick. We break down your video. Let's make you into the quarterback I know you can become. All right, so if this is your first video, we help athletes in being able to run faster, jump higher, just become more athletic by really concentrating on the specifics between the mechanics. And I'm gonna make this a little bit different of a video than what I typically do in being able to give you guys the opportunity to actually see the two athletes that we're gonna be comparing here so we can see them in the last 20 yards. We're gonna be talking about how their ground contact makes a big impact on their ability to run fast. We have two athletes. One is a little bit taller than the other, where one ran a faster time than the other. I'd be interested for you guys to be able to comment down below before we get too in depth into this, who you think ends up running the faster time. I'm going to play it again here. Who do you think ends up running the faster time? Who out of these athletes do you feel like is taller? Who is in a better position as they're going through their drive phase, acceleration phase, and getting into their top end speed? And what I would say is important for you guys to take note here is the difference between how they're striking the ground and how that makes an impact in their turnover speed. So really looking into the turnover of the legs, who's moving the legs faster, and therefore who's able to run a faster 40 overall. And we're gonna go ahead and get into the video. So if you guessed that the faster out of the two was on the left, you would be correct. That's Trey Palmer, ran 4.33, and also he is the shorter of the two. He's 6 foot. We're 6'2" on this side, and also he takes less steps with 19.5 in comparison to 20.5 on the right. So let's get into the specifics. And another thing that also ends up being interesting here before we get into it is the faster 10 is actually here, where Michael ran 1.50 and Trey Palmer ran 1.51. So not a huge difference. Just to give you guys a bit of a tip to help you in potentially running a faster 40 here, if we look to see the difference between how they first start, we can see that Michael here, his first action, I mean, first we see he lifts the hand a little bit there, but we can see that first action ends up being like a drop down and then going out, where we see that with Trey Palmer, he has a little bit of a lean before he gets started there. It's not a big lean, but it's a bit of an action to make it so then he gets a little bit of advantage to get some more horizontal action, where Michael, and his first action is he lifts the hands as he lowers down instead of getting his momentum going forward. So Michael probably could have even ran a better time if he took advantage of that little tidbit, because I would say that that helped Trey Palmer being able to get just a few seconds out in front of the clock. So after 20 yards, at this point, Trey Palmer, this is going to be 11. That's his 12th step right here, and this is Michael's 12th step as well. And so what ends up being important here is just looking at how they are striking the ground and where they're striking the ground, and how that ends up being very important when it comes to the ability to turn over the legs quickly. And there's definitely a height difference here, so there's going to be some differences in terms of how fast we could turn over regardless, because of the difference between the height. But we do also want to consider when striking the ground, and we're going to get into the numbers just so we can get specific into what's the difference. We're looking at the 20th step for really both these guys here. So what we see is we have the foot contact at 0.11 here with Trey Palmer. He's getting the foot back off the ground. It's almost off the ground at 1.7. He's off officially at 2.1. You know, we could probably make that being a little bit lower of a foot contact time. Then he cycles the leg round and hits back at 5.4. Again, that's probably a little bit long, but we'll say still 5.4 just because that's at 5.1 he's still off the ground, 5.4 he's now on the ground, so that's 0.43. And we have the same type of thing here for Michael, 20th step, right? He ends up being a little bit short, but he hits the ground here at 0.99, right? And then by 0.9 he is still, I mean, he looks like he's off the ground, so I'd still say his foot contact time is probably about 0.1, maybe a little bit less. 4.2 he's still on the ground, 4.6 he's on the ground, so that's going to be closer to a 4.7 in terms of how long it takes to be able to cycle legs. So what ends up being the main difference, right? How are they landing that makes it so now the time ends up being significantly different? Because not only is Michael taking more time here, he's also actually not picking up as much distance, because we see, and I mean, it started at the beginning because Trey Palmer was able to get to, like, this is his 11th step, this is his 12th step, where for Michael, who's again taller, his 12th step was here, so he's a little bit more out in front at this point. And then what ends up happening though is we see as Michael's hitting the ground, he's just hitting the ground on one a little bit too far out in front of his body, right? So he's not getting the optimal pull with his hamstrings and with the hips before he actually contacts the ground. And then another big thing that ends up happening here, and as we get going, we'll see how much more we see Trey Palmer. When he hits the ground, he is able to, because the weight's a little bit more underneath him, and really it's a little bit more forward overall, he's able to very effectively get that foot back off the ground. So let's go and time this part out. So 0.57 is when that right foot's off the ground, and then to his foot getting back underneath him is 0.74. With Michael's off the ground at 0.42, and then back underneath him at 0.62, right? So we got 0.2 seconds here in comparison to 0.17 in terms of how fast they both got to this position. I'd even say Trey Palmer might be a little bit more in front, but we can see a big difference between the height of the heel, because even this last frame ends up being critical. We can see a pretty good position overall right here, but as he gets through here, we see that hamstring start to lose strength, which then makes it so this foot starts to go down. Where we see Trey Palmer here, he's still able to maintain that foot being in a high position, which allows this knee to get more of a horizontal action. So what we're looking at is his ability to maintain a good angle within his hip at this position. We'll compare that to what we have with Michael. So being able to get that horizontal push into the ground and also off of the ground. So we need to be able to strike the ground horizontally, and we need our foot to be able to come off the ground horizontally. So then we can get that leg cycle or the transition phase to be as effective as possible. The difference here is when we see Trey Palmer come off the ground, he's getting that knee through very, very quickly. So then he can really get into a position where he's maximizing horizontal force. You can see the difference in the movement. We can see Trey Palmer's going much more here, where we have a little bit more of this type of action with Michael. And that little bit of difference makes it so then when that leg comes off the ground, we're getting much more of an upward movement here off the ground instead of a forward movement with that knee. We want to be able to get a hip flexion off of the ground, which means that that knee is coming forward in hip flexion. That's what drives that knee up and through, is hip flexion, not so much of knee flexion, which is more of like a hamstring curl. So we're here, again, we'll look to see this leg. Yes, we do get right from this frame to this one, there is going to be a lot of leg curl action, right? We just saw a lot of bend in the knee here. But immediately after, look at how fast we're getting into hip flexion, knee drive, getting that leg through. So now this is a very good position to be in. So now we can get to that spot where we have a pretty much 90-degree angle, not exactly a 90-degree angle, 14 degrees, and then that foot right back underneath. And we'll see again with Michael here. So we're here. This is not a bad position to be in. We're a little bit late with being able to get that leg through, right? So as coming off the ground, a lot of additional or too much just leg curl action, not enough hip flexion. We need to be able to strengthen the hip flexors here. Then as we're coming through, notice that when we get into like this same position, so let's see, we're here, foot right underneath, foot right underneath. So that next frame, boom, boom. So now we got this 114. Let's see where we're at here. We got closer to, well, we have two different numbers here. So this one is about 15, and then we have about 23 with Michael, and then we have this number as well, which is about 130. So we're just late, right? We're just a little bit late with our leg coming through. So now we got Trey Palmer getting that toe up and then pulling that foot back underneath, where we have Michael, and Michael doesn't do a bad job of getting the toe up. He gets his toe in an okay position, but he doesn't get the opportunity to have that same time of being able to pull back into the ground. So now when his foot's hitting the ground, he's too far out in front of him, okay? And then that makes it so now by the time that foot gets off of the ground, because the weight gets back, we have to absorb, we have to shift, we shift the weight kind of back into our foot. By the time the foot comes back off the ground, we're way too far back behind with that hip. So again, we'll take a look into this number. And I mean, he's going to be a little bit more regardless. So now we're going to get that back leg in a very extended position with that foot really far back behind, which again, that's going to limit the ability to cycle the foot right back up and through. So we have to be able to land effectively, get effective ground contact. So we're landing with our foot underneath our hip. We're landing on the front third of the foot. We don't want to be landing on the outside part of the foot. That's what it also looks like for him. He's not getting quality dorsiflexion here and then a quality pull. So he's landing really on the outside part of the foot and then really far back and out in front of him. So the foot contact time can get a little bit faster potentially, but really can just be more effective. So then when he's coming off the ground, it's not like he's falling forward the whole time. When you watch him running here, it almost looks like he's falling forward the entire time he's trying to sprint. So we want to be able to very, very effectively, and really to me, it's the hip flexors. Being able to get better activation of the hip flexors is going to be critical for him, as well as, again, getting back into striking the ground. That's why we made this video. Ground contact, how we can more effectively strike the ground in order to run faster. And I'm really making this video because Michael's somebody that I actually know and wanted to be able to work with, to be able to help him run a faster 40 here going into the combine. He's done a lot of great things in the Senior Bowl, and somebody that I think can get a lot higher overall draft stock, and I think should be somebody that is a potential first round draft pick if he could get sub 4.5, right? And I was praying that he would get sub 4.5. I would love to be able to help him being able to get there. I know he can do it, especially when you see the difference here with Trey Palmer, who at 6 foot was able to run 19.5 steps, where Michael at 6'2" took 20.5 steps and ran a faster 10, right? He got 1.50 in the 10 in comparison to 1.51. So I know Michael can do it. I know he has the ability within him. It's just going to be about cleaning up some of those things within his last 20 yards, and really when he gets to his top speed, to make it so he just has a better understanding of how to strike the ground and what needs to be done when it comes to that knee drive, that hip flexion, how to strengthen those muscles. That will really make a big difference. As always, guys, thanks for watching. If you could send this to Michael, I'm going to send it to him as well, but let him know that we're trying to help him get faster for his pro day. Hopefully we can get him down into the 4.4 range, closer to that 4.4 range. You know, sub 4.5 I think is going to be big for him. So yeah, let him know we're trying to help him out, and I'm going to send this to him as well. Hopefully he's able to watch. If you guys want to check out some of the things that we have available for athletes we're looking to run a faster 40, check the description down below. We have a 3-month speed program. We have a 4-week speed program for people that are just looking to get faster very quickly. And again, like I said at the beginning, we put a big focus on the mechanics. What are we doing when we're striking the ground? How can we more effectively utilize our body to be able to run as fast as we possibly can? So again, thanks for watching. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, comments, or recommendations, leave those down below, and we'll talk to you soon.